Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. Together we dive into the world of sci-fi and science fiction. From episodes of Star Trek, Star Wars, to The Walking Dead, Resident Evil, all the hot new science fiction movies from the backdoors of Marvel or DC. The Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. You'll never look at science fiction the same way again.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah, and I am tired all of a sudden. I don't know what's going on with me. Is it wrong to yawn through your own podcast? No, that's bad, because if I yawn, then you'll yawn, and I don't want you to yawn. I want you to learn about news from the world of sci-fi and fantasy and all of those wonderful things that are awesome. My husband called me a nerd today. He's called me a nerd before, but I made a Harry Potter reference, and he called me a nerd, which he says he loves about me, so I'm okay with being a nerd regardless. But I don't think I think I made a perfectly reasonable Harry Potter reference. I can't remember what he said specifically, but I said, oh, so it's like Crabbe and Goyle in Harry Potter when they ate the dessert filled with the simple sleeping draft that Hermione had made. And he just said, you're a nerd. That has nothing to do with today's episode, except that, I do enjoy sci-fi, fantasy, and other quote-unquote nerdy things. And I am cool with being a nerd, even though I don't know, am I a nerd? Am I a dork? Am I both? I could be both. Am I a geek? I could be that too. So many words, all with such possibly derogatory meanings, and yet I feel okay about embracing them. So let's just move away from that, because I started out by saying that I was tired, and I am tired, and I'm not going to yawn through my own podcast, because that would be crazy. And I would have to say, don't worry, it's not you, it's me. It's not the content, it's me. Let's get to that content, because I could just ramble on for days, apparently. Our first story is about the sci-fi drama Bliss that will be starring Salma Hayek and Owen Wilson, that's an interesting combination. They're two kind of very different actors, but I think they could make an interesting combination. At any rate, Salma Hayek and Owen Wilson have been tapped to star in Bliss, which is an Amazon Studios sci-fi drama written by Mike Cahill, who is also directing the picture. It is currently filming in LA. The story follows recently divorced Greg, played by Wilson, who meets the enchanting Isabel, played by Hayek, a woman who lives on the streets and is convinced that the polluted, broken world around them is not real. She believes they are living in an ugly, harsh world simulation inside of the beautiful, peaceful, real world of Bliss. Doubtful at first, Greg eventually discovers there may be some truth to Isabel's wild conspiracy theory. Endgame Entertainment's James D. Stern is producing, with the company's Lucas Smith serving as executive producer. Marcia Swinton will also executive produce. Interesting. Yeah, those kinds of shows are always kind of a mind. They screw with your mind. I'm not going to say the phrase because this is a family-friendly podcast, and I can't say the phrase that popped into my head. But films like that, it's to a tinier extent. It's like at the end of I think it's the first Men in Black movie when we discover that the Earth is just a marble in the bag of a gigantic alien somewhere, that reality isn't what we think reality is. Those always mess with my head, but could be interesting, and that's I like both of those actors, so it'll be interesting to see them in a sci-fi role like this. Also announced recently is that Demi Moore is joining the cast of the USA series Brave New World. The actress has signed on for a recurring role in the series based on the renowned Aldous Huxley novel of the same name. one of those books that many of us had to read in high school, one of those dystopian novels, which we had to read in high school because, we were supposed to read dystopian novels to see how the world could go. And now dystopian novels and dystopian movies and dystopian series are just the in thing that everyone's doing it. The series is set in the utopian society of New London that has worked to find stability and peace by forbidding monogamy, privacy, money, family, and history. Citizens Bernard Marx and Lenina Crown have only ever known their rigidly controlled life in New London, but find themselves curious to explore life beyond their society. When they embark on a vacation to the Savage Lands, they find themselves embroiled in a violent rebellion and are rescued by John the Savage. Demi will play John's brash, hard-living mother. The cast also includes Alden Ehrenreich, Harry Lloyd, and Jessica Brown Findlay. And, dystopian societies, or this one's supposedly utopian, but utopian societies never work. There's always people on the outside, and even when there don't seem to be people on the outside, there's still people who feel like they're on the outside, and something always happens, and people rise up, or people accidentally stumble on something that makes them realize that things are not what they appear, and then off they go. So, I read a bunch of these in high school, and I can't remember if I liked Brave New World or not. I may have to go back and revisit it. Or maybe that's one on the series that I didn't have to. We had to choose from a series, and so I know I read Animal Farm. I know I read Fahrenheit 451. I think I read Brave New World, but I'd have to go back and re-examine it. High school was a day or two ago, so I don't always remember the details so clearly. Let's move on from my memory for another sci-fi adaptation that is coming. This one is coming to Netflix, and George Clooney is set to direct and star in it. It is an adaptation of the novel Good Morning Midnight. The novel was written in it came out in 2017. It is the debut novel of author Lily Brooks Dalton. And so Clooney is set to star in it and direct it. He also recently directed a couple of episodes of Catch-22, which was on Hulu. He will, Anonymous Content and Syndicate Entertainment will produce alongside Clooney and Smokehouse Pictures' Grant Heslov. And there's a quote from George Clooney that when he told Variety, "Grant and I couldn't be more excited to be involved with this incredible project. Mark is a writer we've long admired, and his script is haunting. We're thrilled to be working with our friends at Netflix as well." So it is, the script is written by Mark L. Smith. Co-writer Mark L. Smith. He has written The Revenant and Overlord, in case you weren't familiar with that name. So Clooney will play Augustine, a scientist isolated in the deep Arctic who communicates with a stranded spacecraft trying to make its way back to Earth. The still untitled project will be, as I said, his follow-up to Hulu's Catch-22 adaptation, where he directed 2 episodes. So if you have not heard of the book, here is the description that you can find on Amazon. Augustine, a brilliant aging astronomer, is consumed by the stars. For years he has lived in remote outposts, studying the sky for evidence of how the universe began. At his latest posting in a research center in the Arctic, news of a catastrophic event arrives. The scientists are forced to evacuate, but Augustine stubbornly refuses to abandon his work. Shortly after the others have gone, Augustine discovers a mysterious child, Iris, and realizes that the airwaves have gone silent. They are alone. At the same time, mission specialist Sullivan is aboard the Aether on its return flight from Jupiter. The astronauts are the first human beings to delve this deep into space, and Sully has made peace with the sacrifices required of her. A daughter left behind, a marriage ended. So far, the journey has been a success, but when mission control falls inexplicably silent, Sully and her crewmates are forced to wonder if they will ever get home. As Augustine and Sully each face an uncertain future against forbidding yet beautiful landscapes, their stories gradually intertwine in a profound and unexpected conclusion. Lots of potential for drama in this, it sounds like. And it just says sci-fi adaptation on Netflix. That could be a movie or a series. Let's see. It just says an adaptation. I'm looking to see if it just says project, so I can't tell you if it's a movie or a series. I apologize for not having that information. At any rate, it is time to go ahead and take our first break of the podcast. When we come back, we'll be talking about more news from the world of sci-fi and fantasy. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Sci-Fi podcast, and I'll be right back. Hi, this is Sarah, host of the GSMC Book Review podcast, here to talk to you about The Emissary, Book 1 of the One Great Year series. Written by Tamara Veach and Rennie DeFazio, The Emissary is the journey of soulmates, of good versus evil, and of how humanity evolves over time.
I was reading a book by Graham Hancock called Fingerprints of the Gods. And in that book, he outlines this alternative history that there was a much older civilization than we are currently taught in schools, but it was completely wiped off the face of the earth by some major catastrophe. And I thought, why isn't everybody in the world talking about this?
Marcus and Helgul are the only characters in the story who have past life memory, and the two are involved in a battle between good and evil as this story unfolds.
The whole relationship between Helgul and Marcus shows the importance of how what choice you make in every moment dictates where your life goes and who you become. And you can always change that. And Marcus and Helgul are on that journey together of making choices, and you see how totally different their lives are, even though their beginnings were the same.
The Emissary shows how every soul has a purpose, how all lives have meaning, and how we are all connected. If you want more information about this book and this series, Tamara and Rennie were recently guests on the GSMC Book Review podcast, so check out episode 162 to hear their interview. Their books are available at Amazon.com or by ordering through your favorite bookstore. If you're searching for an epic adventure to read this summer, the One Great Year series might just be what you're looking for. Welcome back to the GSMC Sci-Fi podcast. So before the break, we talked about Bliss and Good Morning Midnight as well as A Brave New World. So we'll move on to a story that is both science and science fiction. And this is from an article on radio.com, KYW News. Is that right? KYW News, radio.com. Yes, at radio.com. And that is that STEM education and science fiction collide at special convention coming to Philadelphia. So I like the headline. I just like the headline even because, science fiction can help us learn about science. And STEM is such an important aspect of education, especially for young women to get them involved. So a sci-fi convention with a special emphasis on people of color gets ready to come to Philadelphia. So see, even better from just the headline. You get STEM, you get sci-fi, you get people of color, you get lots of representation happening in crossovers that maybe aren't always the best represented. So science fiction movies, comics, and shows seem to be more popular than ever, but how people take them in can greatly vary from culture to culture, which is what led Maurice Waters to develop the Black Sci-Fi Convention. People look at a TV show like The Big Bang Theory and say that is a comic book. Well, we don't define ourselves in that manner. However, we are still watching Star Trek and Spider-Man and Superman and consuming Black Panther and all those other things. Well, Waters, said. It was recently announced that the convention would make its Philadelphia debut next summer. Waters says the event is to use sci-fi to get people interested in STEM education. For example, he said, if you are a writer or you're just interested in black holes, we'll have somebody there that you can talk with in a group and ask any questions that you want about that. There will also be comic book workshops for adults and children, how to develop superheroes, how to draw them, and also opportunities for people who are looking to be published to get advice and feedback on their work. So the theme of the convention is Black Women in Science Fiction. Waters said the reason why we focused on that is because black women, historically, and women, period, have been marginalized in a lot of industries and in this science fiction fantasy area. Astronaut Mae Jemison and writer Octavia Butler are some of the women they will highlight. We want to take a minute to really recognize and salute those women, real life and the make-believe world. Waters adds the event is open to people of all ethnicities. That sounds fascinating. I am on the complete opposite side of the country from Philadelphia, but hey, if it's coming in 2020, I could maybe, I might have to check that out. I don't need it, I can use an excuse to go to the East Coast, right? Yeah, that sounds really interesting to me, and I like that they are focusing on people who aren't always represented in the worlds of science and science fiction, so that is awesome. Speaking of, science fiction, space, whatever, there have been some new details shared by Alex Kurtzman about the new Star Trek Picard. And so we all know that, of course, Jean-Luc Picard is returning, that Patrick Stewart is returning as Jean-Luc Picard. He played Jean-Luc Picard on Star Trek The Next Generation. And now Alex Kurtzman is sharing a bit more about bringing him back for Star Trek Picard. Not only are there a few new hints at the direction of the series, but the most important aspect is that Stewart is actively involved in the development of the series. Excellent. For Jean-Luc to be back, Stewart wanted to be able to weigh in on the direction of the series, and it sounds like we'll be able to see what has happened to the captain after Star Trek The Next Generation came to an end. So if you remember a few episodes ago, we talked about the trailer that came out, the teaser trailer for Star Trek Picard, that kind of didn't tell us anything, although it was pretty and we got to see the Picard vineyard, but didn't really give us a lot of details. Kurtzman shares that the state Picard is in when the series kicks off is because a lot has happened to Jean-Luc Picard in the intervening years. He had to deal with some new things and some old things. Both things collide together, and he's made choices that he's not necessarily feeling great about, which is detailed in a non-detail sort of way. It's a little generic, right? We know from that trailer that I just mentioned that something has caused Picard to leave Starfleet, and we will, according to the quote, find out a lot more about what happened. And this will likely be the driving force behind the series as we see Picard on either a new mission or trying to redeem himself from whatever has caused him to leave Starfleet. Kurtzman was quick to point out that Stewart is also an executive producer and has been active in the writer's room, as he knows Jean-Luc Picard more than anybody. That would be true. This is an essential piece of information to fans, as Kurtzman stresses that, quote, we are reverent of him. His opinion on what happens really matters to us. We couldn't do this show unless he was happy about it. It is good to see that, it's good to see that Jean-Luc Picard, as played by Patrick Stewart. I'm glad to see that Patrick Stewart is weighing in because, he has played Jean-Luc Picard for quite a length of time in terms of both the series and the movies and all of those wonderful things. So he does have an insight into that character, and it's good to know that he is involved in this in a broader capacity. So I am a Star Trek fan. I am excited for this new series. I'm excited that Patrick Stewart is returning. He's my favorite Star Trek captain, although my husband would argue with me on that because he's also a nerd. He's just like a closet nerd. He's not even a closet nerd. He just likes to give me a hard time about being a nerd. Whatever. Moving on again. It's been an episode of Moving On, hasn't it? And that is that Marvel has launched a high school play program featuring Squirrel Girl, Ms. Marvel, Thor, and Loki. So if you are in high school and have ever yearned to be part of the Marvel Universe, you now have your chance, which sounds cool. Marvel has partnered with Samuel French to present a series of 3 one-act high school plays as part of a program called Marvel Spotlight. The 3 plays star Squirrel Girl, Miss Marvel, and teenage Thor and Loki. Okay, now I want to go back to high school drama because I would love to do this, although I didn't know that much about comic books in high school, so I might not have been excited then. Christian Borle penned Hammered, a Thor and Loki play, while Karen Zacharias scripted Squirrel Girl Goes to College, a Squirrel Girl play, and Mirror of Most Value, a Miss Marvel play, was written by Maisie Asari. Perhaps to make these shows more manageable, these heroes' superpowers won't be emphasized so much as their emotional journeys. Makes total sense in terms of a high school production. Can't really have that many superpowers going on in a high school production. You can do some, but maybe not as much. As the site for Marvel Spotlight states, these are tales of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And that quote is, Marvel Spotlight is an all-new way to experience some of the greatest heroes ever. A series of plays developed for teenagers, Marvel Spotlight explores the humans behind your favorite superheroes as they balance mastering their newfound powers while facing the real-world challenges of young adults. Marvel tells the stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, and the best part of Marvel Spotlight is that you get to interpret them in your own way as you expand the Marvel Universe into a whole new medium, on your own stage, in your community. That is really cool. And we are going to talk a little bit more about that really cool idea, but we are going to take that second break of the podcast. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast, and I'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Back to the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast. So before the break, I was talking about this new Marvel. Marvel is launching these new high school plays, and they are plays featuring our superheroes as teenagers, as young adults, being challenged by all the things that are challenging in those teenage years. Marvel VP Creative and Content Development Stephen Wacker said, over the last 80 years, the Marvel Universe has grown to inspire billions across the globe by telling relatable, personal stories reflecting the world outside our window. With these amazing plays and this uncanny group of talented playwrights, we hope to give the next generation of Marvel fans a chance to bring those stories to life and explore what it means to be a superhero right in their own backyard. The licensing fees are $75 per performance for one of these plays, or $125 per performance for 2 or more. If you want to learn more, you can visit the Marvel Spotlight website. And here is the synopses of those plays. So, Squirrel Girl Goes to College. Doreen arrives at Empire State University to make new friends and protect them from supervillains by keeping her superhero identity a secret. But when a beloved computer science professor suddenly disappears, can Doreen trust her friends with her inner squirrel so she can save the day? Hammered, as Thor struggles with the stress of final exams, his brother Loki finds himself under a different sort of pressure. Neither are beneath pranks in the endless competition for their parents' favor, but underneath all the thunder and mischief, these two princes of Asgard discover a bond that will last millennia. And then Mirror of Most Value. Kamala attempts to boost Ms. Marvel's fledgling superhero profile by writing her own fan fiction, but when building a fandom becomes an obsession, Kamala's schoolwork and relationships begin to suffer. To become the Jersey City hero of her dreams, Kamala must learn to accept herself just as she is, imperfections and all. Fun. I think this sounds like a really fun idea for people who can swing the licensing fees and do those plays in a high school setting. That would be really cool. Let's see. So next story is William Shatner. We went from Picard, Patrick Stewart, to William Shatner because this is not a story about William Shatner as James T. Kirk, but it is a story about him and a new series called The Unexplained. William Shatner is investigating the unknown again, but he's not going to have to travel as far as he did when he traveled to places that no one had gone before. He is beaming aboard the new History Channel series, The Unexplained, on which he will examine extraterrestrial and paranormal mysteries. The show will air on Friday nights after Ancient Aliens. In all his years playing a space traveler, Shatner admits he has never had a close encounter himself, and those that report that they have are generally mocked or marginalized. But there are certain events that seemingly can't be explained, whether it's UFO sightings or something more earthbound. From the producers of Ancient Aliens and The Curse of Oak Island comes The Unexplained, and I should jump in here that Unexplained is UNXPL. There's no E, so you get your capital U, your capital X. So The Unexplained, a 1-hour nonfiction series that explores the world's most fascinating, strange, and inexplicable mysteries. Hosted and executive produced by Golden Globe and Emmy award-winning actor William Shatner. Each episode will feature compelling contributions from scientists, historians, witnesses, and experiencers, each seeking to shed light on how the seemingly impossible actually can happen. From mysterious structures like Florida's Coral Castle and so-called evil places like the cursed White City of Honduras, to strange creatures and bizarre rituals, The Unexplained will explore subjects that have mystified mankind for centuries. So on this show, Shatner will be presenting these stories, including possible rationalizations, but not necessarily hard answers. Shatner did speak to Deadline about his new series, saying The Unexplained is what it is, and it's all about the mysteries that surround us that remain inexplicable. Evil places on Earth that seem to collect bad deeds, or people who've had seriously rare things happen to them, like the woman who's been struck by lightning more than twice, or the car accident victim who comes out of the coma and plays the piano. He never played the piano before, now he's playing. There are all kinds of mysterious events that have happened. Some are well known and some are relatively unknown. And we've developed the research, and that's the show. It's an attempt to show you a mysterious event, all of the context of it, and then offer a possible explanation in some cases, but certainly no real proven scientific explanations. So interesting. Very interesting. Shatner then said, I love talking to those people who have had and are absolutely certain about it, an incident. I love talking to them and I love exploring what it is they experienced. But then in talking about aliens, there are also instances of accredited people, airline pilots and military pilots, not just somebody in the Florida woods that got picked up by a spaceship and examined by a spaceship. A spaceship picks up, that was repeated. So not just picked up by a spaceship and examined. There's one event I'm thinking of too, where military pilots scrambled for an unknown object in the sky, and they saw it and they armed their guns and they were chasing it, and then it just left them standing there. It went so fast at such a sharp angle that they couldn't keep up. They reported all that, and it's that kind of thing that makes you scratch your head. So this will premiere on the History Channel on July 19th at 10 o'clock Eastern Time. And then finally, we are going to talk about Orphan Black. Orphan Black, the next chapter, which didn't, many people were hoping, but maybe it's not going to be exactly in the format that people were expecting. Because, of course, Orphan Black, the series, has come to an end, but fans can be happy about the fact that Tatiana Maslany is returning to voice her iconic characters in the upcoming audio drama Orphan Black, the next chapter. The Emmy-winning star is back thanks to Temple Street Productions and the digital fiction startup known as Serial Box, who are teaming up to bring us more of this classic story. The 10-episode series will see Maslany back, but it isn't clear how many of the clones we'll hear, how many of those clones will be back in this series. The first installment of the new series will be free, with each following chapter running at $1.99, or you can buy a season pass for $13.99. The plan is to release a new episode weekly until the story is complete. When the 5-season running show came to an end, we know that Cosima and Delphine were off to inoculate all 274 of the Leda clones against the disease, which could easily kill them all. The new story is going to jump forward 8 years after the events of Season 5, with Maslany voicing all of the same characters and new ones as well. Sadly, we aren't spilling the beans on what to expect outside of the fact that Cosima and Delphine will definitely play a big part in the story. So, in a joint statement, Ivan Schneeberg and David Fortler, who are the co-executive chairman and executive producers of Orphan Black, shared, "We are delighted to be able to extend the Orphan Black franchise through this new and innovative partnership with Serial Box. Orphan Black's devoted fans will now get more of what they love on this exciting listening and reading platform." There is no news yet as to if this is a single season, but we do know that Serial Box has already has a deal in place to give us original stories by Marvel properties such as Black Panther, Jessica Jones, Black Widow, and Thor. So it's possible that a longer-term approach is something that they might have in mind. It's also not clear if this will at all be related to the new Orphan Black television series coming to AMC. That new show is said to not to be a reboot or a spin-off, but exists in the same world as the original series, which would leave a tie-in as an option, but not necessary. Interesting. So if you are a fan of Orphan Black, it sounds like there's a lot of new things coming up. If you're a fan of the original, you can listen to the audio version. If you're, well, you wouldn't know if you're a fan of the new one, but still, if you want to branch out along with the Orphan Black world, then you can check out that new series. So with that, we will wrap up this episode of the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me, and join me again next week to see what's going on in the worlds of sci-fi and fantasy. Have a great week.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.